Good afternoon, everyone. This has been a really rough day for me. I recorded this video earlier and I thought it went well, but clearly it didn't. The video track recorded perfectly. The audio track, for some reason, didn't record. And yet all the all the meters, all the audio and visual meters on OBS, that's the package I'm using right now, they all indicated perfectly. So I have no idea what happened, but I've been about 2 hours trying to find out what the problem was, and I truly don't know what it was. Whether it was an intermittent problem or not, but in any case, it's working now. I've done so many test runs just to make sure it is working. And I pray it is, because an hour and a half podcast, it's not difficult. It's just a lot to do repeatedly. So, okay, let's get on with it. I have 83 pages of research done in text form and a number of video and audio tracks. I'm using a green screen in the back, as you can see. I can change that to various things and change the soundtrack as well. So I'll keep going. Anyway, this is podcast 12. I've made a couple of intermittent ones, but I've committed to myself and to a friend to do 52 of them, one a week, one each weekend. And I thank my many viewers, which are probably less than 3. So thanks, Jeff, for being patient and sticking with it. I know my podcasts are not good. I accept that. But they are getting easier for me. Maybe difficult for you to watch, but they're getting easier for me. There's a lot to do when you're by yourself. And it's a little bit of an issue of technology, a bit of an issue related to the computer I'm using. It's not a bad one. It's relatively new. It's just not sufficient for all of this audio. It bogs down. In any case, I'll do the best I can. So this is podcast 12, and we have 40 more to go. I'm doing 52. That's my commitment. In any case, this podcast is, I don't know if you say it's personal, but it drives me insane because it relates to people who are in my age range, which is senior citizens. And it relates to people who are coming into the system. So let's say in their 50s and 60s. So I do find it personal, and it truly affects everyone, even people who are in their 20s. And I know very few are watching us. Fine, it's perfectly fine. But the issue is broken systems, fraud, taxes, poverty, the collapse of fairness in Canada. So it basically speaks about taxation and how the inequality of fair taxation prevails in Canada. It probably is prevalent in a lot of other countries, but certainly I'm going to speak about Canada. And this 83-page research paper I've done, I'm not going to be able to repeat it all or speak about every issue in it. And this is the second time I've done this podcast, so I realize I've missed some important data. Oh well. In any case, so let's keep going. Canada likes to pretend it's a fair, compassionate, well-run nation. I question that. A place where hard work pays off, a place where seniors are respected, a place where the middle class thrives, a place where social safety net protects the vulnerable, a place where system works. That Canada that we speak of, that doesn't exist. I will speak about a number of friends and associates I know, no names of course, and no locations, and I'm going to make an assumption that everyone of the 2 or 3 people who watch this terrible podcast also know a number of people who are scammers and are taking advantage of the system. And really, the system is the taxpayer. So let's be clear on that point. It's not that your neighbor or you or somebody is scamming the system. The system is the taxpayer. And the people who primarily pay taxes in Canada, let's keep it to Canada, is the middle class. Everybody knows. Every single person in Canada knows the people who live below the poverty line, who are challenged in terms of financial assets and so forth. They don't pay anything. They take from the system. They don't give into it, and what they do give in is so minimal. It's not even worth speaking about. And of course, the upper class, the rich and affluent, they have legal tax holes, which have been created over the years by their friends and associates in government, so they can avoid paying a lot of taxes. And most of us know that corporations absolutely do not pay their fair share. So we're left in a Canada where the primary system reflects the middle class. And I'm going to ab-live a little more on attempt 2, as opposed what I did on my first podcast, which is a lot of reading. People I know, many of them don't have homes. They rent. In other words, they don't have a mortgage. They don't aspire to owning a home, at least not now. They don't. So they rent. Typical, just general renting in Peterborough for one floor of a house is going to run between $2,500 and $3,500 a month. And of course, there's a basement and an upstairs. And I assume most landlords, homeowners who are renting out a home for income have developed the basement or the downstairs sufficiently that there's rentals from two sources, the main floor and the basement. And one home that I do know, and the homeowners, they're paying $3,000 a month for the main floor and for the basement, and they share utilities, which is very interesting because they're not two separate meters. So if one renter is using more electricity, more water than the other, but they're splitting the utilities 50-50. So this homeowner, renter, whatever, he is creating approximately $6,000 a month from this one home, and apparently he owns 3 or 4 homes in Peterborough. And assuming he has full rental, he makes a good dollar. And without going into the financial issues in depth, the area where I live, taxes are approximately $4,000 to $4,600 a year. So multiply that by 4, and the gentleman who owns these 4 houses is paying $16,000-17,000 a year in taxes. Everything else is paid for him. He makes $24,000 a month. In any case, bottom line is there's a lot of money. There's a good sum of money to be made in rental if you can keep the rental fully occupied. So let's talk a little bit more about Canada and what's going on. Now, Canada we live today is where the middle class is collapsing. I think most people who think about it will probably agree that people in the middle class are struggling. I don't know if the majority, but from the data I can find, over 50% of the middle class do not own a home. They do not have sufficient funds for a 5 or 10% deposit on a $500,000 or $600,000 home. In other words, they're just paying rent, and that money is lost. When they leave, there's no asset base being built. So the middle class is collapsing. Seniors are living in poverty. It's clear, really clear, abundantly clear that seniors, and let's go a little further. People are 55 and up many of them are struggling. They just don't have the assets and the wherewithal to live a reasonable retirement life. Fraud is rampant and it's ignored. Government doesn't want to deal with it, or if they want to deal with it, they're not prepared to deal with it. Taxes are among the highest in the world. I've got, like I say, 83 pages of data I've pulled out, and Canada is amongst the highest taxed nations in the developed world. Services in Canada are declining. They're more indicative of what's in the U.S. U.S. pays reasonably low taxes as compared to Canada pays almost the highest taxes in the world. But in the U.S., it's primarily user pay when you want something. In Canada, we'd still have some social services, but they're dwindling. And from what we're being told, these free services are probably going to expire in the near future. There's simply too many people withdrawing from the system, not enough people putting in, and we'll address that further down. In any case, services among the worst in the developed world. The honest are punished, the dishonest are rewarded. I think that's pretty clear. Bureaucracy protects itself, doesn't protect the public. Government systems are outdated, unresponsive, and unaccountable. And when I was young, I'm a retiree. When I was young, my family always said, honesty, integrity, work hard, get a good education, invest, and save your money, and find something to do in life that you enjoy. Because if you enjoy it, you'll do well. If it's just another four-letter word, WORK, you probably won't do well. It'll be a drudgery and a terrible thing for the next 40 or 50 years. So, being honest today, I mean, not being dishonest in terms of finance, but being dishonest in terms of your position and in terms of social services, I think is quite prevalent. I know a number of people. I'll give you an example. I have to be careful, but it doesn't matter. There's no description of the person other than I know this gentleman, call him a gentleman. He's over 6'4". He's a big fellow. He's in his 50s. He's the father of children, and he has been on social assistance, welfare, and every other social assistance program which is available, including he gets his house paid for by the government, gets a car allowance, computer every couple of years. These are not brand new; they're all used and refurbished, but he doesn't pay for them. Doesn't pay for internet, gets food allowance, and what he does, he works under the table, and in the winter he cuts trees, Christmas trees, and during the summer he works as a carpenter. And he gets paid cash under the table. How nice! And I didn't equate that into financial numbers, but you can do it. He's probably, in terms of what's given to him through Canadian social assistance, I mean, you figure it out: house, car, internet, food, everything's all paid for him. He doesn't pay anything; that's all free. And he's working under the table 12 months of the year. So he's probably, in terms of dollars and cents, he's probably creating over $100,000 a year. And we can say, everyone says, oh, it's the system's paying for it. It's not the system, it's the taxpayer. It's the DAMN taxpayer. I can't say too many vulgar words. YouTube will kill me. But in any case, that's one example. I know another example, and I have to be really careful here. I guess I can't say this one, but we all know, everybody knows somebody who's scamming the system, or if you wish, scamming the taxpayer. And the taxpayer is you and I. It's just nonsense. In any case, this document is not a rant. It's not a conspiracy. It's not an exaggeration. It's a truth report. A blunt, unfiltered examination of Canada's system, how Canada's systems have failed, and the very people who regarding the very people who built this country. This document is about fairness, more accurately, the collapse of fairness. It's about seniors who paid taxes for 60 some odd years and now live below the poverty line. The poverty line in Canada is somewhere around $25,000 a year, and we'll address that further on. The middle class workers who carry 90% plus, if not higher, of the tax burden. The fraudsters exploit the system or take advantage of the taxpayer. They don't care. They don't care if your neighbor's paying, like in Peterborough for a typical home, your home taxes are going to be potentially around $45,000 to $5,000 a year. They don't care if they live and scam. They don't care. They're happy to sit back and laugh at your neighbor who's paying. And then you get the bureaucrats who refuse to take responsibility. The police agencies that pass the buck. It's really not a police issue, but the tax system squeezes the honest, ignores the dishonest. The retirement system leaves lifelong contributors in poverty. We're talking not only people who reach the age of 55 to 60 or 65, we're talking about war veterans, people who have, ladies and gentlemen who have been in our military, and they're in a position of near poverty. This is crazy. The lack of any unified fraud reporting system. There's nothing like a 911 reporting number where you can anonymously report someone who's defrauding the system. It doesn't exist. This absurdity of a country that taxes everything except the wealthy. The need for seniors to unite and demand representation. The need for a minimum senior income, and I estimate that to be $50,000 a year. The need for new social contract. We need that really badly. We're going to talk about a lot of things and a lot of ideas that I've come up with, which from my research and knowledge have not been brought to the surface. I'm sure somebody with a few brain cells has thought of these things, but I can't find anything online. In any case, I'll offer a few alternatives. This is not a gentle document. This is not polite. This is not sugar-coated. This is the truth. This is the nonsense that's going on out there. And even though I only have 2 or 3 viewers, thank you, Jeff. Only have 2 or 3 viewers. That's fine. I'm doing the best I can. I know I'm not a good presenter, but the documentation I pull up is valuable. And anyone out there who has the time to think about things, need to think about things such as excessive taxation, and your turn at retirement's coming up. And will you have the resources, or are you going to be relegated to live in poverty? So the conversation is real. It's just, do you want to think about it? You should. So we're looking at the collapse of the middle class. The middle class is the backbone of any functioning society. It's the group that works, pays taxes, raises families, buys homes, supports local businesses, keeps the economy alive, follows the rules, plays by the book. But in Canada, middle class is being crushed. It's being destroyed. Being polite and respectful, I don't care who would say the middle class isn't being decimated. You're entitled to your opinion, but the stats show the middle class is being destroyed. And how long before the middle class will be destroyed? I don't know. If I live 20 more years, which is doubtful, I don't think there'll be a middle class. I think there'll be the wealthy and affluent and the well-connected and celebrities and people of notoriety, and there'll be everyone else. I don't think there will be a middle class. In any case, why the middle class is the only group that actually pays taxes? Well, I'm sure there's been many a doctoral dissertation and research project on why only the middle class pays taxes. But come on, those with limited assets, the homeless, those who are challenged from anything, they don't pay any taxes. How can they? They all live. Some of them just live from handout to handout. And the wealthy and affluent, they're not going to pay any taxes. They're not going to pay a dollar more than they have to. And it's insanity. In any case, The middle class pays full price for everything. Everyone knows this, and if you don't, think about it. Full income, I'm middle class. Full income tax, full HST, full property tax, full fuel tax, full carbon tax, full insurance, full utilities, full cost of living. We pay everything. There's no free rides for us, but everyone else is getting a free ride. And I think it's okay to say, as Canadians, we're generally so passive. The government says, "Oh, we're going to raise your taxes another 10%." Who complains? Nobody says anything. Okay, raise the taxes, raise them. Who cares? We just don't complain. Imagine the screaming and yelling and public discontent would be in the U.S. if the government came along and the IRS said, "We're raising all your taxes 10% across the board." There'd be protests everywhere. Not in Canada. In any case, the middle class is the default taxpayer of last resort. We pay everything. When the government spends millions and millions and probably as it should, sends millions and hundreds of millions to the Ukraine, they probably should, but money doesn't grow on trees. Money's taken from the middle class. It's taken from the money we work and generate. And while there are good causes, it's just, where does it end? When government needs money, they don't go after the wealthy. Not a chance. It's too complicated. They don't go after the poor. That's just politically risky. They go after the middle class because they're vulnerable, they're visible, they're traceable, they're compliant and honest. And that's just the way it is. I guess the answer is, and we'll talk about lottery winnings and taxation further on, but I guess the answer is to this: win a major lottery, hoard it, invest it, go into the stock market, and remember, your returns in the stock market are based on your risk. No risk, no gain. If you have higher risk, you get more gain. And if you're investing in reasonable stocks, you probably should be making somewhere between 8 and 12% ROI. And if you're in mutual funds, which are kind of only for older people, you're going to make 3.5 to 5.5%. Then you're going to pay a percent and a half to someone to manage your mutual funds. So bottom line is, one of the paths to get out of this middle class is to win a lottery, and don't spend it. We all know of people who've won $1 million, $5 million, and a years later they've got nothing. They've wasted it all. But you've got to get out of the middle class. Otherwise, you're going to be taxed to death. The middle class is punished for being honest. Meanwhile, fraudsters work under the table. People work under the table. Scammers collect benefits they don't qualify for. There's companies out there, there's people out there that have their full-time job to scam us, and they get away with it. People misreport living situations, and I know of a situation clearly a situation of someone doing this. Insanity. People hide income. People manipulate the system. People steal from employers. People take advantage of loopholes. And I think it's obviously clear in terms of physics, gravity doesn't exist. Money exists. Finance exists. The world doesn't turn on gravity as Einstein, E equals mc squared. That's nonsense. All nonsense. The world turns on money. Without money, you've got nothing. You're going to be sleeping in a ditch, potentially in a beautiful refrigerator box, and standing there with your cup asking for money or handouts. Gravity's nonsense. If you don't have money, you're beat. So the people who take advantage of the system, or SCREW, the taxpayer, there's no enforcement, there's no consequence, there's no accountability. The honest pay, the dishonest benefit. This is not a functioning system. It's a rigged system. A rigged system for the rich and affluent, the people with notoriety and connections, and everyone else suffers. And yeah, and if I could, I use profanity, but I think it's appropriate. But YouTube won't allow me to, so I have to restrict anything I say that's too out of line. In any case, everything costs a lot. Groceries, fuel, utilities, insurance, rent, property taxes, home repairs, vehicle maintenance, medication. basic survival. The cost of living has exploded. It's exploded exponentially, not linearly, exponentially. But incomes have not. Incomes are pretty much stagnant. Sure, you get an extra. We used to have a joke when I was in university. I did my best to put myself through university without burdening my parents, and I worked in the electrical trade. And the joke was the electricians would say to the owner, "Oh, we need an extra buck an hour," and he'd give you a buck an hour, and you'd pay more in tax than you did without the buck an hour. Fathom that one through. In any case, Canadian making 60,000 today is the same purchasing power, more or less, as someone making 35,000 in the 2000s. The senior living on CPP and OAS, even at Maxim, is living below the poverty line, and we'll talk about the exact numbers shortly. A family renting a modest home, and I don't know anybody's renting a home. They're renting a floor in a home, are paying 50 to 70% of their income on housing. Single person can't survive without government assistance. It's insanity. You wonder why some young people are discouraged. I know people, I won't talk about location. I know people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I've asked them, if you not got 5 or 10% deposit on a $500,000 or $600,000 home, and of course 10% on a $500,000 is $50,000, and 5% is $25,000. And they say, no, they don't. And they say, well, we're hoping that when our parents pass, that we'll get an inheritance from them enough to put down on a house. And then they tell me their parents are still paying a mortgage, and they're in their late 50s and 60s. I mean, I always grew up with the idea that home ownership was a given. I don't think it is today. And I think if some young people are discouraged, I understand it. I truly understand it. Home ownership probably is going to be out of reach for most of them. So why bother? Why spend a fortune? Most of us know who went to college and university. Most of us know what opportunity costs. The cost of doing one thing as opposed to the cost of doing another. So let's use a simple example for young people. They're going to spend, let's just say they have to pay for their own education. So 4 years doing a university degree, let's say the total cost for renting and books and food and accommodation, let's say they're spending $20,000 a year. So for a 4-year degree, okay, say 4-year degree, it's $80,000. Well, if they had been working, let's say minimum wage, for the sake of numbers, is $20 an hour. They work 40 hours a week. That's $800 a week. That's $40,000 a year. So $40,000 a year times 4 is $160,000. So they graduate from university after a 4-year degree. They're potentially in debt for $80,000, or they could work at a job and be ahead $160,000. The opportunity cost is not what it used to be. It was back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. You graduated with a 4-year degree or a master's degree. You could almost be assured there was going to be a company or companies there to bid on your services, and you'd probably start somewhere between 80 and 100 grand a year. Where now you graduate with a 4-year degree or a master's degree, there's no guarantee you're going to be hired. I know of this one gentleman who graduated from a university in Toronto, and he has a PhD in theoretical physics. That's a tough course. There's a couple of courses probably more demanding, like genetics. I know another fellow who was trying to do a master's in genetics at a university in Toronto, and he couldn't get through a couple of courses at the fourth year level, and he had to make a career change. But a 4-year degree in theoretical physics, that's a PhD in theoretical physics, that's a tough one. In any case, he was in his early to mid 40s when he graduated. I was there in the grad lounge when he passed his defense of his dissertation, and I met him, 10, 15 years later, and he was working on a farm. I said, well, what do you mean you're working on a farm? He said, I applied to every physics lab, every institution around the planet, and the university I graduated from had no actual physics labs like CERN or some of the big universities in the U.S., and his his knowledge was strictly theoretical, and his PhD was it's legitimate. It just wasn't recognized in the global theater. So he said he was making more money. I said, then why wouldn't you teach? And he said, I'm making more money working, and I can't tell you where he was working. I can just, or who he's working for, but I do know he was making more money tapping nails, maintaining this horse farm than he would teaching. So here we go, another PhD employment doesn't exist in the field he wanted to work on. So the opportunity cost, I was bringing up, the opportunity cost of going to university or college is really a big question. One would have to sit down and do some calculations. It looks like, from what I've seen from the government publications, they're looking for tradespeople. They're bringing tradespeople. That they're opening up the visas and asking people from outside of Canada with trades to come into Canada, because apparently there's a trades deficit. Well, as some people know, to get a trades ticket, you need 4 years. You have to go to school. You have to pass all your school exams. You have to, and then you have to pass an exam for licensure. And from what I've understand, most people take 2, 3, 4 shots at the exam for licensure before they actually get their trade ticket. So there's a lot going on. Do you get your trade ticket, which is going to take like 4 years, and then maybe another year or two to get your ticket, or 6 years? Or are you going to go to university and get a master's, and you basically you're hoping to get a career and it may not materialize? So it's tough. In any case, am I rambling? Yep, probably. In any case, Canada's cost of living now is higher than the UK. Here I go, a lot of hires. Higher than France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and most of the EU. And it's higher in the US in many categories. But Canadians receive less in return. Less healthcare, less retirement support, less infrastructure, less enforcement, less accountability, less value. This is the core contradiction of modern Canada. We pay Scandinavian taxes, which are high, and receive American services, which are almost to the level of 100% user pay. In other words, if you want something, you're going to pay for it. And if your user can't pay for it, then you do without. But in this country, that's kind of the situation. The failure of Canada's retirement system, CPP and OAS, puts everyone at poverty. CPP maximum is approximately, with round numbers. My friend Danny wouldn't like it. He wants to nickel and dime everything. But CPP max is $16,000 a year and change. OAS is about $8,500 a year. And the total of that is just under $25,000. That's poverty. That is poverty in Canada. It's probably poverty in most of the developed world. And that's what you get as a retiree from the Canadian Forces, as a retiree from the low income and middle class. If you have had a couple of children, you're potentially supporting grandparents and so forth. You're going to retire on $25,000 a year. That's maximum, by the way. OAS is set, but CPP, it reflects what you pay into it. So if some of you people out there are thinking about your retirement, have a good one. I hope you're traveling to all over the world, to Hawaii and the Caribbean, and traveling Europe on $25,000 a year. Right. And let's be clear, those are maximums. Most seniors don't get the maximum. Most get something around $18,000 to $20,000, which in cumulative is around $22,000 a year, not $25,000. So that's just a general. And all of this is supposed to cover rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, medication, clothing, emergencies, repairs, insurance. I think it's okay to say I saw a recording from a very affluent American trillionaire who has spent his life investing. And I'm quite sure that most people out there who are investors know who I refer to. And he made a statement that beyond your home being your home, your sanctuary, it makes no sense for people to buy a home. He makes a statement: it's more financially frugal and prudent to rent a home. You don't pay taxes, you don't pay repairs, you don't pay anything. You pay your rent, and if your utilities aren't included, you pay your utilities, your share of the utilities. And if the house falls apart or burns down, you walk away. And that's what a trillionaire said. So home ownership is not what it used to be. Not what it used to be. Some people today, I heard an acquaintance. By the way, I only have a couple of friends. Everyone says, oh, my friend. Everyone's got 10,000 friends. You don't. If you make one or two friends in your lifetime, you're doing well. But it's difficult to introduce yourself and say, oh, this is my acquaintance. But everyone's not your friend. Don't even think of it. It's not. It's just a term. You don't want to be derogatory. In any case, I have a friend who is a wannabe lawyer, and he knows everything. And he talks about money has no value. Government's just going to print more. This is his attitude in life. He's going to spend. He doesn't care. He said, I'll go on social assistance. He said, I'll do anything. I don't care. This is his attitude. He'll scam everything. In any case, let's talk about a little bit about retirement. I've got 83 pages. So Canada's retirement system was designed more or less in the 1960s. Well, people lived to approximately 72. I knew when I was younger, if you reach 72, you're doing well. If you reach 73, you're probably going to pass. In any case, back in the 60s, reaching 72 was pretty good. That was a good shot at the kick at the can. Housing was inexpensive. I remember back there, you could buy a house back in the 60s for $40,000 to $60,000 and get a nice detached home. That's true. Housing was inexpensive. Food was inexpensive. Utilities were inexpensive. One income supported a family. Try to do that today. Even if the only income earner is at $200,000 a year, try to do it. I have a friend living in Markham, and he and his wife both work. He's an engineer. She's an RN. They still were struggling, and I won't go into any more than that, but they're still struggling. Taxes are just dynamite. In any case, workplace pensions were pretty much the standard back in the 60s. Today, pensions far from being a given. I think the majority of companies now are not giving pensions. And seniors didn't live 25 or 30 years after retirement. And retirement, I believe, has always been 55 to 60, or maybe 60 to 65. People just didn't live a long time after 65. But today, people are routinely living relatively healthy, and they're ambulatory. They're able to get around and take care of themselves. And I think it's fair to say if a person doesn't live to 80, they've probably abused themselves in the younger years, or they're not taking care of themselves now. But I don't know what the average age is in Canada, but most of the people I know live to their middle 80s. In any case, but CPP and OAS really didn't evolve. It didn't match up to the years that people are living. So let's talk about a proposal I have. I've got a number of them, and I don't want to make this thing as long as I did in the first run. I'm suggesting that every senior citizen has a mandatory right for $50,000 a year minimum. And I'll get into a tiered system, which I think is fair. I actually can't believe that of all the people with these massive degrees and alleged great education and great thinkers haven't come up with this. But we need a tiered retirement system. And I'll get to that in a few minutes, but it's not right here. 18 to 25,000 a year is nonsense. Total nonsense. It's irresponsible, and our government shouldn't even be considering it. We need to double that. Everybody has a minimum at retirement of 50,000 a year. You've paid into the system potentially for 65 years. Sure to heck, you're entitled to 50,000 a year in retirement. Forget CPP and OAS. Forget it. CPP, of course, is based on what you contribute. OAS is nonsense. But in any case, we need to make some changes, and I'll get to that in a minute. I should have put the tiered information right after, but I made a mistake. I think this proposal is fair, simple, and it's overdue. And there's no senior citizen that I know wouldn't agree 100% that the minimum social income from our goofy government should be $50,000 a year for senior citizens. It's not a luxury. It's not extravagance. It's not gold-plated pensions. $50,000 a year it allows you to live. Just enough to pay rent, to pay utilities, groceries, to afford your medication, whatever it is, to maintain a vehicle, to handle emergencies, live without fear. It's not radical. It's not extreme. It's not unrealistic. This is fairness. And if this was any other society except Canada, we'd be screaming. But Canadians were so passive. Oh, it's okay. Raise the taxes. We say nothing. So here's something like the benefit or the scaling, I think, is only fair. If you've lived in Canada all of your life, let's say you retire at 60, easy numbers to work with, or whatever. So you live in Canada for 60 years. You're entitled to your full benefit of $50,000 a year after you retire at 65. And if the government deems you have to, because people are living longer, there has to be more contributions into the system, they have to raise from 65 to 70, so be it. I don't think that's totally unreasonable, but let's say for 60 for now. So you've been in Canada for 60 years, you've paid into it, you've paid all your expenses, your taxes, on and on and on. You're entitled to your 100% of your benefit, which is $50,000 a year, or if you wish, $4,200 a month, something like that. 42, good enough, or $4,100 a month. If you lived in Canada for 30 years, you get 50% of the benefit. You get $25,000 a year, and so forth. If you lived in Canada for 45 years, you get 3/4 of the benefit. And if you just moved to Canada, you just can't expect the Canadian. If you just moved to Canada, even within 5 years of just moving in, you've contributed nothing. You can't expect to walk out with $50,000 of free money for nothing. It can't. It's just not right. But then again, everyone wants. But I think that's fair. This tiered system, you paid your taxes all your life. You paid school taxes. People who have no children, they pay taxes. I mean, this is another huge doctoral dissertation subject. Why do people who are single, have no children, why are they paying school taxes? Okay, well, the rhetoric is they benefit from the education of people who have the students who are in school. Maybe so, but there's enough people out there who have children to pay school taxes. The few of us who don't have children, we shouldn't be paying school taxes. It's insanity. In any case, so this tiered system of $5,000 50,000 a year. It's not discrimination. It's not exclusion. It's arcturial fairness. It's just plain fair. By the way, this is basically the same model used by Australia, New Zealand, Denmark, the UK, and many EU nations. Canada is an outlander. We don't do any of this. We're the only country where someone can arrive at the age of 60 and contribute for 5 years, if that, and collect full benefits, similar to anyone who's lived in the country for 50 or 60 years. I don't think anybody with a few brain cells would agree to it. It's insanity. No wonder the middle class is decimated. It's just crazy. In any case, this is not fairness. It's not sustainability. It's not respect for lifelong Canadians. So let's go on. Fraud and work under the table and system abuse. Fraud is rampant in Canada's social systems. It's not small fraud, not occasional fraud, and not a few bad apples. It's widespread, normalized, and multi-generational fraud. Like I mentioned earlier, this one, call him a gentleman, I don't care. But anyway, this one gentleman, he 6'4", he's a big fella. He's young, well, relatively young. He's in his 50s. He's strong. He's healthy. He's working two under-the-table jobs. He's getting full government benefits, home, everything else you work for, he gets for free. And now his kids are doing the same thing. I mean, they know every word, every check mark, every Xbox to click on to scam the government. I wouldn't know where to start. And I'm going to make an assumption that most of you wouldn't know where to start. But they know. They know. There's fraud in welfare, disability, housing subsidies, cash-based work, under the table, misreported living situations. I can tell you about that one, but I'm going to get killed if I do. Under the table labor, unreported income, seasonal cash jobs, EI manipulation, tax evasion, benefit stacking. We're getting killed. Middle class is getting destroyed. And why? That's the question. Why? Because enforcement costs money. Because investigations take time, because bureaucracy is slow, because agencies don't communicate, because politicians don't want headlines. They don't want anything. They just want to do as little as possible and keep jumping across the floor. Why they do that and why it's allowed, I'll never know, but they do. Because fraud numbers would embarrass the government. So they don't want to do anything because the system is built to deliver benefits, not police them. So let's talk. So the honest get published, the dishonest get rewarded. I mean, how many of us, sit back and think about it. How many of us in the middle class working our behinds off, both parents working, barely cover the expenses. You're paying rent, not a mortgage. And even if you are paying a mortgage, you're putting down, let's say you put down 10% on a $600,000 home at $60,000. You got outstanding a mortgage of $540,000. $540,000 paid off over 25 years. Can't do the math in my head, but I mean, you're probably paying with insurance, which you have to have on your which you should have on your mortgage now. I don't know if it's mandatory, but you should have it. You're probably, everyone knows that the first half of the mortgage, it's all interest, and only in the last half you start to pay off some of the principal. Your mortgage probably for $540,000 on a $600,000 house with 10% down is probably going to cost you over $1 million. So think of your neighbor or someone you know who's sitting there and the government's giving them a free house, free food, free cars, free. I mean, how do you sit back? How do you justify it? Because I can't. In any case, okay, I want to get into. So let's talk about another thing. I spoke briefly about which I purport is only fair. Everyone at 65 gets a $50,000 minimum yearly payment from this socialist government if they've been there for the lifetime, 60 years. I think that's fair, and it's a tiered system. So let's go into the second thing I think we need to develop. We need to develop a 911 style fraud anonymous reporting line. People should be able, just like they do on 911. Well, I'm not sure if 911 is anonymous, but there's another line which I forget the 3-number digit. You can report Crime Stoppers. I don't remember the number, but in any case, we need another anonymous reporting number like Crime Stoppers, because I'm not sure if 911 is anonymous. I don't think it is. But people, if they see crime if they see things going on which are clearly fraud, and they're just SCREWING, the taxpayer, there should be a number where we can call in and report this, because ultimately, your neighbor, your friend, your acquaintance who's riding the free gravy train, you're paying for it. You are paying for them for a free ride. It's not your neighbor. It's not your friend. Your neighbor's not your friend. Your neighbor's out there taking a free ride on your dollar and on the sweat of your back. So we need a single, anonymous, non-tracked reporting line to the government. I believe most people out there know what a TREED, TREEDED, reporting thing is. It's not very well described, but it's like a tree. If you when you're paying taxes to the CRA, you want to call in and speak to someone who will give you some tax advice. You end up with all these branches, and you get to one number. They say, "Oh, well, that's not me. You got to go to that branch." We need something clearly defined. No nonsense. Don't hide it. It's just like when you go to Amazon. You try to get customer support. You have to go through 10 loops at the bottom of the page, and finally it says, do you want us to call you now? And you put your number in, but they don't make it clear. Amazon, just like the government, they don't want you to call. They don't want you to call. They don't want to make the number easy. That's why they put it in this treed mess. So you spend 2 or 3 hours trying to find a number, and then you get to the number and they say, well, I don't do that. That's not me. I don't take care of that. Call someone else. So we need one number that goes into a central repository for information, or computers. It's put into a computer system, and it's disseminated to the proper department. If it's welfare fraud, it goes to a welfare department. If it's theft from a company, it goes into another area. But we need a number. We don't need to report it to 25 or 30 different branches. One number, one call in, it's put into a computer system, and from there it's acted upon. In other words, what we get now is, if you finally go through the TREED system and find a number, they say, oh, call this department. That's not our jurisdiction. Try this number. We don't handle that. Call the RCMP. Call your local police. Call the federal office. Call the ministry. Call the hotline that doesn't answer. And you sit on the line and they put you, I love this one. You call a government agency and say, okay, well you're on hold. You're number 400,000 in the hold sequence. And you get down to the next one in line, the line goes dead. I love that one. I love it. That's good. In any case, we need a 911 or 411. I know what 411 is, but we need some sort of reporting number where we can potentially put a stop to this fraud, because it's not a joke anymore. All of my friends out there who are middle class folks like I am, and lower middle class, not a joke. This is real. They're killing us, these scammers. And scammers could be your neighbors, your alleged friends, your acquaintances. It's nonsense. Our taxes are going to keep going up. What do they say? Latest number I found is an estimate of every person living, not like of 20 year to 2060. Every single living soul in Canada has a debt proportion to approximately $65,000. So I look at the government and think, if I was in government, and this is not me speaking from me, it's me speaking in a philosophical aspect. If I was in government, if I was the PM, I would say, well, okay, we've got this huge multi-trillion-dollar debt. We're going to get rid of it. We're just going to say, okay, everyone in Canada, now you got a mortgage, which we're going to put on you. We're going to apply to you. They know who you are, of $65,000. You have a choice. You can pay it off. You can pay it off as a mortgage. You can pay it over your lifetime. You can pay nothing. And when you pass, your estate will pay it. And if your estate won't pay it, we'll pass that debt, whatever's outstanding, onto your heirs. Is that coming? Think about it. I think that's one probable solution to the government. They're going to say, all the money we spent has helped everybody. It's helped Canadians, helped the rich, the poor. It's helped those the needy. It's helped the rich. It helps corporations. It's helped Canada in terms of global status. So everyone's going to get this $65,000 debt rammed onto their bank account or onto their CRA bill. On the top, it'll say, first thing it'll say, you owe $65,000 as of 2026. And every tax year beyond that, if you decide to pay it off cash or pay it off so much a year, then it'll show the decrease amount. But I think that is potentially what's going to happen. We're all saddled with it in this BS about this debt helping Canada and all this. It's rubbish. It's rubbish. Total garbage. In any case, let's move on, because I've got a number of other recommendations I want to make before I lose you. And thank you, Jeff, for sticking with me. And Danny, well, you watch once in a while, but I think I've got 3 viewers. In any case, okay. So let's talk a little bit about write-offs. I think the majority of people believe, let's say there's a company, a corporation. So there's a company out there and they make or they generate $100,000 in taxable exposed income that the CRA looks at. And let's say they determine that there's been $10,000 of theft from their company. So now their $100,000 of tax exposure, many people would think it's reduced by $10,000. So they pay $10,000 less, $90,000. Well, in fact, that's not the case, but it shows their potential thinking. They might save $2,000 or $3,000 in taxes if they've got a $10,000 loss, which they can apply to $100,000 of tax exposure, but they still lose $7,000 or $8,000. My point being is, this theft, it's not a write-off as a lot of people think. It is a tax deduction, but CRA doesn't give them a $10,000 tax exemption. So here again, we the consumer, we suffer because a company suffering or experiencing a theft is going to pass that theft on to the consumer. I worked at a company on a short-term basis, and again, I have to be careful what I say. And there was rampant theft from inside the company and between people working inside the company and their friends who would come after hours, and everybody in the company had keys. And it was accepted that employees had keys to come and go. I spoke to the owner, and he raised his hands and said, I don't want to know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. And he just walked away. So I dropped that scam box. I got out of there, and I don't know what ultimately happened, but they're still in operation. But I guess the company makes so much money, and they're in a bit of a remote area, so their employees are all rather local yokels type of thing. So he probably had the attitude, I don't want to stir the pot up on this. They'll get me one way or the other. But I'm making a point again. The scammers and the dishonest, they win. We don't. I want to bring something else up. Wages are stagnant. Um, and when there's not consumer demand, hours get cut, wages get cut, prices go up, moral collapses, good employees leave, and the cycle continues. How many people do you know are happy? I truly, honestly, don't know anybody who's happy. I don't. I don't know anybody, whether they're extremely affluent, whether they're employed, unemployed. I don't know anybody who's happy. And is this the life we're in? Nobody's happy? Maybe it is. I want to talk, and I'm jumping here because I'm tired, but I want to talk a little bit about tax fraud. So let's talk about Minnesota, U.S. The numbers keep varying. I don't think they're sure. I don't think they'll ever be sure. But apparently, the tax fraud down in the states in Minnesota is somewhere around $50 billion. That's 500 million. 500 million? 5,000 million. No, 50,000 million. I'm losing it. Their 50 billion is 500 is 5,000 million. Okay, so they've estimated there's $50 billion in tax fraud down in Minnesota. That's one state. That's what they've uncovered so far. I mean, Canada has 10 times the population. I have the numbers on this, but I want to make sure I get it out. Canada has 10 or is it 50 times? I'll get to it later on. But about 10 to 50 times the population of Minnesota. Imagine the tax fraud that could be going on in Canada. I mean, we could be looking at $1 trillion. And is that not money that this government would want to recapture? And potentially the people who have defrauded the government, would they not be penalized and have to pay back what they've stolen with a penalty? I mean, something's missing. Something's missing. I don't know what it is. In any case, let's talk about inheritance tax. Canada's one of the few developed countries with no inheritance tax, but that sounds great, right? Well, it's nonsense. Except here's the truth. Canada taxes the estate before the kids, the children, or the heirs get anything. When someone dies, assets are deemed sold. Capital gains tax is charged. The estate pays the tax. Whatever's left over goes to the heirs. So yes, Canada does have an inheritance tax, but it's indirect. And there's so many loopholes in it that it's another example of legalized fraud. Legalized. End up, if you have a $50 million estate, you pay $10 million in estate taxes or inheritance tax or death tax, whatever. And if you have two heirs, you end up leaving them with $20 million each. Well, here we go again. The rich propagate or support the rich. It just keeps going and going. And yeah, and if anyone out there is pee-offed, you should be. You should be, because this is just garbage. So middle-class families, we get hammered. We get clobbered, destroyed. The rich pass down wealth. The middle class pass down tax bills. So let's talk about. This is kind of a bit of a contradiction, and I'm not sure exactly how to get around it or address it. But OAS is allegedly has been created to benefit seniors who need help and support. I think that's a good focus. But wealthy seniors, even millionaires, still get OAS unless their income is extremely high. And I didn't know this, but my understanding is seniors who have an income, not assets, an income is different than assets of around 90,000 and have an income at 150,000. I'm using round numbers, okay? my friend Danny would go crazy. He has to have everything nickel and dimed. So if your income, not your assets could hypothetically be, let's say you have an estate worth $50 million, but your income, what you take out, what you report to the CRA, what you use, is between 90 and 150 million. Then at 150,000, 150,000, then you get less OAS, which brings out the point. Maybe it's not your income, but maybe it's your assets we need to be looking at. If you've got assets of $50 million, but you've got an income of $50,000, and I'm sure the accountants have ways of taking your income. Perhaps if you're drawing off $50 million, you're drawing off, let's say 8%. That's 40,000. 50 million, 400,000. Sorry, 400,000. So if you're 400,000, if you had 4 children and 2 adults, so you take the 400,000 divided by 6, so you're around 80,000 each, sort of. Yeah, about 80,000 each. So if you're giving 80,000 of income to 4 children, their tax exposure is nearly zero. If your spouse if his or her income is very low, then you pay little tax on that. My point being is that if you have an estate worth $50 million and you're making 10%, you have 500,000, 5 million a year that you're making on interest, and you're taking out the full amount, then your tax exposure to the 5 million is much less if you dispose of it correctly. So the point being is, those people, if they can keep their income, their taxable income below $150,000, they still collect OAS. You explain that one. That if that's not robbery, I don't know what is. So let's be clear once more. A senior living at $22,000 a year on OAS and CPP, that's poverty. And is that what we're going to do to our war veterans, people who've been in the military, and middle class people who have a family and just haven't been able to save? Is that what we're doing to them? Because it is. So let's talk about luxury tax. Vehicles over $100,000, boats and planes over $250,000. Duh. How many people do you know in the middle class that are out spending $250,000 on boats and planes and have to pay almost no tax on that? Well, if that isn't a slap in the face, I don't know what is. I don't know how many people are out there spending over $100,000 on vehicles, but I do acknowledge that some vehicles in the upper end are $100,000. But I guess the question becomes, does a working middle class person with 2 incomes, do they both need $100,000 vehicles? I don't think so. In any case, people that can afford that, they almost avoid tax. Wealthy people buying luxury vehicles through corporations, they write them off. I believe a write-off is over 7 years, and that is for an accountant to work on, but I believe you can carry write-offs forward 7 years. So they avoid paying the tax. The tax raises the tax they potentially would get is almost nothing from this, where the middle class buys used cars, basic repairs, insurance, fuel, everything. They're paying tax. We're paying tax on everything. In any case, the middle class is pretty much the only class of people, well, there's only 3, right? That pay everything. We pay, and everybody else sucks off the system. Or if you wish, the system is us. The system is the middle class. It's exactly the same thing. So I want to talk about another idea I have. And this is, let's talk about unions. In the US, seniors have a very powerful advocacy model, and the government listens to them. They're such a large voting bloc that if the government was to dismiss them, they potentially would reduce their chances of getting into government. In Canada, we have nothing. We have nothing. Almost every, in fact, probably 99.9% to infinity, seniors have no representation. The only time there's any power for any of us in Canada is during that 30 seconds when you go into the voting booth. You have power for 30 seconds, and after that, the government says, that's the end of it. They don't care. You vote someone into government, you vote them into the party on the platform that they purported and representative, and a week later they jump across the floor. And is this truly representing you and me? I don't think so. In any case, I think we need to look at the unions in Canada. The unions were a powerful entity. Today, their membership's declining. It's declining in a big way. Maybe the union, somebody out there needs to think beyond outside of the box and say, we have millions of senior citizens. We have millions of people, excuse me, approaching, from the 50 range and up. These people have no representation, and we don't. We have 30 seconds to have power once every 4 years if we're lucky, and then the government gives us the finger. They don't care. Nobody cares past that 30 seconds of voting. Promises all over everywhere. And they say they don't care. But if the unions had 4 or 5 brain cells, they would say, we have an opportunity here. The opportunity is we will represent senior citizens and middle class folks who have no representation. And even at $10 a month, $120 a year, I have the numbers here. I'll pull them out shortly. I just want to make sure I don't miss this part. There's potentially millions and millions of dollars that would flow into the unions if they would diversify their focus, yes, on their membership, their working membership, but then turn around and focus on retirees or focus on middle management, but expand their vision and their focus. Unions could be the mainstay of all of Canada. We need them. We need some representational body, and unions are a way to do it. And I think everybody, 100% of the people would spend $10 a month to join the union that would fight for our rights. And some of our rights is we want $50,000 a month on that scale. If you've been in Canada for 60 years, you get your $50,000 a month. We want rights. We want things. And we want government to know that we're a voting bloc. And if you SCREW us, we're going to react. And you're not going to get our vote. So I think the unions have a huge opportunity here. And I have not heard anything. I've found no research that any union has thought outside of representing their immediate working membership. And they should be. Imagine, I've got a few numbers. Imagine if 25% of seniors, we're not talking middle class, we're talking seniors, retired seniors, were to join a union. There are 7 million seniors in Canada. If 25% joined a union or unions, that'd be approximately 1.75 million members. If dues were even $10 a month, that's $210 million per year in revenue for that union. And all the union has to do is represent seniors, be an advocacy for seniors, apply for political pressure. You're doing that now anyway. Why not do it an expanded version? Lobby, legal challenges for national campaigns, for real representation. Unions have a chance to become bigger, larger, more powerful than they've ever even thought. But I have no information, no data that would show anybody in the unions has a brain cell. I see all they worry about is their union members. Well, come on, people, start thinking. You have an opportunity to make your union huge, dynamic, important. And you have an opportunity and you're blowing it. So let's get with it. The system right now punishes honesty. If you're an honest taxpayer, you get SCREWED everywhere you turn. You pay, and you get almost nothing. And this is only going to escalate. It's not going to go down. Taxes will never drop. That they might drop a tax and they'll hide it in another way, another area. Taxes are here to stay. And we need to be more aggressive as a people. And this union participation is an easy way to make it happen. Really easy. So let's talk about a little bit about Scandinavian countries. They pay high taxes, but they have free healthcare, free dental, free medication, free education, free pensions, free strong social programs. We don't. We pay taxes like we're insane. No one ever says boo. No one says okay, enough's enough. But we get nothing, next to nothing. In Canada, we have high taxes, but we get nothing. I don't even want to go into what we get. Look at education. We're still paying a fortune, and this government has. I did a podcast on this. There's approximately, I believe the number is $50 billion revenue path from international students coming in to study in Canada. They want to close that down. There's approximately, I think it was $65 billion revenue path from all of the streams from legalized gun ownership. They want to close that down and shut down people who've been vetted or are honest, legal gun owners. So in round numbers, there's $100 billion of tax revenue in some level that they want to shut down. Who's paying for all of this? This is, you do the numbers. It's insanity. It's just plain insanity. There's all sorts of case studies out there. The under the table worker. How many people do you know? Two people on the street I know. They're running weekend companies out of their garages. Is it legal from the bylaw perspective? I don't know. It just seems that there's a lot more going on, and people, it's questionable. Are people paying their tax burden? Let's talk a little bit about more. I'll get to it. So I'll talk a little bit more. I want to get to a couple of points. I'm going to go through, like I said, 83 pages. I'm going to lose a lot of people, but even if one person is thinking, then this podcast has value. We've all heard and read, especially when the newspapers were a primary source of information. They're not now. Now social media is, and the question is, what's truth and what isn't? I mean, there's so much fraud and misrepresentation out there. Social media is so biased, you never know what is from the right or the left. You never know what angle they're looking to represent. But in any case, when newspapers were a standard source of communication, all of us who are older heard of senior citizens living in major centers like Ottawa, Toronto, even the GTA, other major areas in Canada, and they had a choice to make. Didn't have enough money to pay for food, heat, hydro, and taxes, so they had to do without. You hear of seniors living alone, sitting in the dark. They pay their taxes or their rent and food. They can't have both. I mean, that's not right. It's just not right. Uh, and there's something else I ought to bring in. A lot of people, many people, openly say they don't like President Trump. Okay, I don't want to get into that, but I do want to get into how many people in government are working for nothing, for no compensation. Only one that I know of, President Trump. He hasn't taken any salary, no compensation. I would like. I should have. I didn't. I should have done some research on how much money our MPs and MPPs make, and the Prime Minister and the Premier. But if they're truly concerned, if they're in office to help Canadians or help their constituents, then why aren't they working for nothing? It's a rhetorical question. Are not most of these politicians very well to do? I believe the question is yes, they are. I mean, and why? Why aren't they? Why aren't they? Yeah, well, I got this garbage thing coming up here. Oh, darn it. Getting killed here by one of these pop-ups. In any case, if these people, politicians, truly are there, as they say, to help Canadians, to help society, then why don't they work for nothing? Why don't they work 4 years for nothing? But we know that, and I got to be polite and respectful here, we know that they don't work for nothing. They don't. So politics is just another business like everything else. They want their money. They don't do anything for free. This nonsense about working for Canadians and helping Canada, it's all garbage. It's a power trip. So let's talk a little bit more about, okay, I talked about retirement. Okay. So this is combined max on 2001. I got into some numbers here, but I kind of covered that. I've covered on some of the situations of seniors, and this is a kind of a diluted podcast on taxation and the position of seniors and those approaching 60 or those in their early 50s considering retirement. It's not a clearly defined podcast on tax or retirement. It's kind of an overview. And with 83 pages, it's like for a dissertation, that's just a start. Just a basic start. Just basically touched on things. In any case, some of these things I've kind of addressed. Let me just go through a few things, scroll down. So I have 83 pages here. Give me a second. I don't want to stop it and start it again. And I don't want to be rude or derogatory to any one or any class of people coming in. I do want to address the situation which I did touch upon very briefly earlier in the podcast, that I used to say in the past. I used to say, why are some young people? They seem like they don't care, or they seem focused on the now as opposed to focused on the future. Well, I think it's probably pretty clear when you think about the situation. When the parents are renting, the parents are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they're still renting, or they're in that age group, and they've got huge, giant, outstanding mortgages. They're driving cars that are rather beat up, old. Maybe the kids are saying to themselves, and they look at the unemployment, or they look at the employment, and they look at the jobs out there. Like Ross Perot, one of the presidential candidates a few years back, his exact words about NAFTA. He said, if NAFTA goes through, there'll be this huge sucking sound of jobs as they head down to Mexico. And he was right. Canada really is a supplier of raw materials, natural resources. We don't have much manufacturing here. It may be growing a little again, but before NAFTA, we had manufacturing jobs in Canada. We lost a lot of tech jobs. And so I can see that young people are thinking, why am I spending? Everybody has a 3-year degree. Almost everybody has a 4-year degree. A master's degree is pretty much commonplace. A PhD, lots of PhDs out there. And I hear PhDs working in McDonald's. Not that that's a bad thing, but you think with 3-year degrees, 3 years, generally 3 years. 4-year degrees, 4 years. A master's is 1 or 2 more years. A PhD, well, my friend who got his PhD in theoretical physics, he was in his early 40s. So let's say he took 10 years to get his PhD. Jane Goodall, I believe she got her PhD when she was in her 60s or 70s. My point being is I don't think there's any definitive time frame to get a PhD. So young people say, I'm going to spend all this money in school, and they say there's no career. My dad used to say, don't use 4-letter words. Well, work, I was always told, find something that you enjoy doing and you'll be very successful. Well, how many people with a master's or PhD are going to walk into a position where they own their own company? Where if you get a trade ticket, you get your master's, you are able to open up your own company. So think that one through. So maybe today, back in the 50s when Teddy Kennedy was graduating from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, Caltech, maybe people who graduated back then, employers were lined up bidding for their services. It's not the case today. It's not the case. A PhD is certainly an accomplishment, but there's no guarantee you're going to make $100,000 a year, even if you find a job. So maybe the key today, and young people are finding or thinking about it, is the future's really a mess. And is all this education, is it going to be fruitful? I think maybe young people are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for, because it makes you think. And I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but I'm beginning to think that it's the human experience is you do something, there's a motivation. If you go to work, your motivation is you're creating wealth for something. Maybe it's you want to buy something. Maybe it's you want to support someone or pay off a bill or something. But I believe that people and governments, they do things, there's a reason, there's a motivation. And in terms of conspiracy, I wonder, is there a conspiracy, a controlled, global, developed country conspiracy to hold people accountable through excessive taxation? The more taxation you have, the less liquid cash or disposable income you have, and you're not able to cover your bills and expenses as well. There's more discontent in the family unit, if there is a family unit. Maybe governments, this is a way to control the populace. Because the way the taxation's going, there's no rhyme or reason, and the spending out there it's beyond business. You'd think most business models, you have a business. You have a gross income of $1 million. Your profit margin is 10%. You have $100,000 of profit. You can spend $100,000 in terms of, okay, I'm kind of exaggerating. You can spend $100,000 in terms of tax dividends, or you can purchase stock for the company, or you can give the employees stock options, or you can buy more capital equipment, or you can increase your wages or increase your workforce up to 100,000. But if you have 100,000 of profit, of money to spend, then you spend to that limit. Our governments, they're spend. It's insanity. And I wonder if the motivation isn't to control the population. I wonder. In any case, it's like this last Artemis trip that was sent around the moon with 4 astronauts. Did we really need to send 4 astronauts? What did I read? If memory serves, it cost the U.S. taxpayer $5 billion to send these 4 astronauts around the moon for a pleasure trip, a joy trip. Did we really need to send 4 of them? And did we really need to send a manned flight around the moon? Did we really? Could we have not done that through robotics or automation? I think we could have. I even go further, and I wonder the billions, if not trillions of dollars we're spending on the space station. Are we actually doing any science, or are we just up there screwing around? There's more going on. You have to admit it. There's more going on than meets the eye. And I think the way they keep the population not focused or thinking about what's going on is they tax. People are so stressed out they can't think. In any case, okay, I've got a few more things to make. I think there's a lot of resentment out there. I've already stated, no one I know, not one person I know is happy. Everybody is concerned. Everybody is stressed to the nth degree. I mean, 40, 50 years ago when I was young, people didn't run around shooting up schools and driving into crowds and all that sort of thing. Today, it's almost a given. I mean, what's this all about? And is it in part, not totally, is it in part because people are stressed, they're going crazy? I don't know. But you have to ask yourself, is it possible? I don't know. Hold on, I'll get to a few more things here. I've spoken about the tree phone number thing, where you end up in one branch and they tell them that they can't help you. You got to go to another, and all this nonsense. We need a new social contract. We have to do something. We need, the people in Canada need accountability, and we can't do this as individuals. It doesn't matter what people say. They say every vote counts. Well, I'm not sure it does. I would say every 100,000 votes count. Every vote. I have acquaintances, and they have 2 homes, and apparently, with 2 homes, they have a legal right to vote in one area or another. And these people say, I don't vote. And I said, why not? And they say, because I know the outcome. Well, is this what democracy's come to? People become lethargic. They don't want to participate. I mean, voting takes half an hour. I mean, the voting takes 30 seconds, but actually driving to the voting location and giving some ID, which certain people in the States, they don't want to give their voting ID. They feel they should be able to walk in without any credentials and run from voting station to voting station. I mean, pure insanity. But in any case, I don't know. But the pressure on working Canadians, I think, is rising. No one's happy. People realize that something's wrong, and they don't know how to do anything about it. So I understand my acquaintances that say I don't vote because it's pointless. I get it. That's why we need the unions to come into play and expand their sphere of influence and take on new memberships, new diversity, or even expand. Instead of calling it the electricians union, call it the senior citizens union. Even if it's under the same sort of management style or the same management team, but we need something. We need something to bring Canadians together. We got the middle class carrying the entire country. It's absolutely insanity. I'm going through some of these things. I said I got 83 pages, and if I read it all, I'd be here for probably a day. Caregivers. Let me just scroll a little bit more before I shut this down. I brought out a few things about the states. Well, truth. Let me go for a little bit more before I lose you. I guess the majority of this podcast has been on helping seniors, and I guess I've kind of overstepped that control. I created another chart here, which I don't have to put on the screen, but we certainly need changes in the system. I don't know why governments are allowed to spend and put a nation, and the nation is the people, the population. Why are they allowed to spend trillions and maybe, trillions and trillions of our dollars as they please? Should there be a referendum on spending over 50 million? Should there be a referendum if they're spending more than 100 or 500 million? Then we know that would happen. Say there was a new law. There had to be a referendum. Here's another good point. There had to be a national referendum if they spend over 500 million. Well, then they go up and spend 499 million, 999 dollars. They'd be that stupid. In any case, let's talk a little bit. I know older folks will recall this. Remember in the past, they used to say working people spend 5 months working for the government and 7 months for themselves. Well, the new numbers are more or less blow that away. For an average Canadian, average, whatever that is, they're working 6.5 months a year and 5.5 months a year for themselves. So 6.5 months we work to pay the government. Middle class worker, again, I don't know what that is, but they're working 7 to 7.5 months a year to pay the government, and 4.5 to 5 months to pay to put money in their own pocket. Seniors, they're losing 7.5 months of income, which they've saved in taxation, and they're able to save 4.5 months of saved money for themselves. A single adult, which I found strange, they work approximately 8 months a year for the government and 4 months they work for themselves. I don't think this is sustainable. Why would you work? In round numbers? My friend Danny, he wants to nickel and dime everything, so he wouldn't be happy. But why would you want to work 6 months to pay the government taxes and all this other baloney, and 6 months for yourself, or on an extreme, 8 months for the government and 4 months for yourself? Why would you bother? Isn't it easier just to scam the government? Again, I'm not saying you should. I'm not purporting you should do that. I'm saying people do it. And their motivation is, why am I going to work 6 or 7 months for the government and 4 or 5 or 6 months for myself when I can sit on government subsidies and work under the table. Again, I'm not suggesting anybody do anything illegal. I'm simply saying these are the facts. If you don't think I'm right, do your own research. It took me a week to put this together. It's not that difficult, and I should have done a better job. Okay, but the bottom line is things are a mess, and it's really. Are we a social government? Because I think it's been mathematically or financially proven that social governments can't survive. There's no one paying into the system and everybody taking out. It can't work. It's like Mandami down in New York, the mayor. If my information is correct from what I've heard, is one of his platforms that he ran on to get elected was it was going to be free transportation for everybody all through New York. Free everything. Well, he gets in. I mean, from what I've heard and read, he's not a stupid man. But politicians say whatever they want to say to get in. And after they get in, oh, I didn't realize. So here we're in a situation where he wants to bring, if you wish, a non-capitalist attitude into New York, and he wants to bring like socialist ideologies where everything is free. And who's going to pay for it? Because I'm hearing right now that there's a fairly substantial exodus of well-to-do people leaving New York, heading down to Florida. And the stats that I found, this is true. And the influx of people coming into New York, there isn't any. People aren't moving into New York. The people with some finance who are somewhat affluent, who have business concerns, they're leaving the state because they're paying the taxes for this Mandami who wants to put forward a socialist ideology. So in Canada, are we? I've heard people say, "Oh, we're a socialist country, and nobody has to suffer. Nobody lays in a box in a ditch. Nobody has to stay outside all winter, and everyone's entitled to 3 meals a day." Well, who's going to pay for that? Well, we all know. We've talked about it for an hour now. That's the middle class, and at some point, somebody in the middle class is going to say, "Enough's enough." If everybody else is on the scam, I'm going on the scam. Anyway, I don't know. I don't think Canada can continue to survive with this mentality. If you want something, people have a thing called desire. They want things. People are greedy. I know of this one family. How do I say this? His brother and wife moved from a very nice conservative home, which their mom and dad paid for cash. They wanted a bigger home, so they moved into a bigger home. And the brother, his wife, goes out and buys a new, or puts her signature on a big new giant home to keep up with the other brother. And the one brother whispers to me, he said, "If I lose my job, we're bankrupt." Well, it worked out. But my point is, we all want things, and somebody has to pay for it. And so if you all these, that's a terrible English. If people don't want to work, they want to just lay on the streets, like down on George Street, to see all these people making encampments right along Main Street. And they want to live on handouts and so forth. Somebody has to pay. Every time I go to church, or if I go to one of the grocery stores, "Oh, do you want to contribute so much money to the homeless or the needy?" It's endless. And like one of the major coffee chains, I won't say the name, everyone knows who it is. They say, oh, well, contribute, and we're going to send kids to camp. Who gets all the credit for that? You don't. If you give $10, you get no credit. If you give $100, you get no credit. The coffee company gets all the credit. They get all the tax write-offs, all the tax deductions, because they're giving to a charity or they're creating a charity. You get nothing. You're the sucker who's paying all the money. Yeah, right. So can Canada continue along this socialist path of expansionism? Because we are expanding the socialist ideology. More and more people are going on the scam, and less people are middle class able to pay for it all. And should there be discontent? I think so. Let's go back to a few more things before I kill this thing. Oh, yes. I don't know if I brought this into the podcast yet. I think I'm suffering brain damage today. Like I say, this is the second time I did this podcast. The first one, the soundtrack didn't record. In any case, let's talk about mortgages. So there's a new mortgage, which I believe has passed in the U.S. through the House of Representatives. I believe it's now in the Senate. And if it passes the Senate, then it'll have to go to the president's office for his signature or denial. But this new bill is purporting a lifetime mortgage, which is really interesting. And I've done some of the math, and I've seen some of the math. It's really interesting. And so the whole idea of a lifetime mortgage is that instead of a typical mortgage being 15, 20, 25 years, I mean, even 10, depending on the size of the mortgage and so forth and so forth. Let's say a typical mortgage in Canada, or if you wish, globally, is 25-year mortgage. And everyone knows that for the first, if you wish, 20 years, you're only paying interest. The last 5 years, you pay off the majority of the principal, or you pay off all the principal. Well, in the U.S., they want more people to have access to home ownership. And they say, okay, if they've got a $500,000, use some arbitrary number, $500,000 home in the U.S., you have to put down 10%, which is $50,000. If you don't have $50,000, well, then put down 1%. And you can pay off the remainder over 40 or 50 years. And a typical mortgage in Canada would have an interest rate of, come up with some arbitrary number, somewhere between 4 and 7% maybe, depending on your credit score and so forth, and the amount of the mortgage and how much you put down, something like that, say 5%. So, but what I've read and researched is that this lifetime mortgage over 35, 40, 50 years, the interest rate is down to 2 and 3%. Well, that's interesting, because at 2 or 3%, not 5 to 7, a lot of people would say, I want that house. I'll take a 50-year mortgage. And it just becomes a standard monthly payment. Like your internet. Let's say your internet's $100 a month. Let's say your car payment is $100 a month or $100 biweekly. Or your utility bill's $100 a month. So this long-term mortgage is maybe something that needs to be explored in Canada. It would put a lot more people into a home instead of renting. And of course, as everyone knows, when you rent, when you leave, you walk away with nothing. When you have a mortgage, you walk away with some assets based on your contribution and the amount of principal you've paid off towards the amount of money you paid off toward the principal. But you do walk away with something. And maybe this lifetime mortgage is something that needs to be explored. And I think we need to look at an equal burden. And this has been the subject of probably 1,000 or 100 doctoral dissertations and research papers. We need tax equity. And I suppose that could be another podcast, which I'd be prepared to do. Might be interesting. But a tax equity scheme where everybody, let's say some arbitrary number at 25,000. Everybody pays $1,000. I don't know. I'm just coming up with some number. But at 50,000, everybody at 50,000 pays 10%, and everybody at 100,000, corporations, everybody at 100,000 pays 25%, and it goes up. But everybody pays a share of the tax burden, because everybody knows, and I've said it, everybody with 2 brain cells knows that the poor, those who have financial hardship, they don't pay anything. They take from the system. The rich, affluent, well-connected people of notoriety, they pay nothing, or so little that their asset base keeps growing. It's just the middle class, the fools in the middle class that pay everything, and we're getting killed. So maybe we need a new tax scheme, something that's fair and equitable, and everybody pays a share. And if I think we needed to discuss something along the lines of, if a person has assets of over $50 million, then they enter into a system of 100% user pay. They pay for what they want. I'm not trying to discourage entrepreneurialism. I'm not trying to discourage excellence. But perhaps the number of people who have $1 billion, like allegedly Oprah had $1 billion. Does anyone actually need $1 billion? I guess that's another discussion point. But maybe once you start to reach a certain income level, maybe it's 100 million, maybe it's 200 million. Maybe at that point, the social mechanisms don't occur for you. You have enough to support yourself and your family. I think that's something that needs to be examined as well. In any case, I've come to an end of 83 pages of research. I've missed a lot of things which I realize should have been included, which weren't. But that's all right. That's all right. I think the couple of points that need to be made in conclusion is that we as a civilization need to do more to support our senior citizens, regardless of where they came from, whether they're military vets, whether they're just hardworking people, or just simply people 60, 65, or 70, whatever the government determines is the age for senior citizens. We need to have more respect and more care for them. I would even go as far to say as when a senior citizen reaches the age of that, they don't pay any more taxes. No more school taxes, no more home taxes, no more taxes on water, and they're tax exempt. They paid taxes for 65 years. Enough's enough. Everything that's out there and built, they built it. They paid for it. At 65, if that's the age the government says is when a person's senior citizen, or at 70, whatever it's determined to be, no more taxes. It's end. It's over. Senior citizens at that age have paid enough. It's time to give them a little break. I think that should be absolutely initiated along with the $50,000 a year minimum. I'm not saying there should be more, but I think everyone should be entitled to $4,100, $4,200 a month, which is not going to give people the ability to travel to Hawaii and travel over Europe and get on Lear jets and Cessna Citations and travel all over. It's not going to happen. 50 grand is not it's not gold. It's a subsistence level income. And if we're going to allow all these freeloaders and such in Canada, all these people working under the table, then we should take care of our senior citizens. I think unions have a great opportunity to increase their role to society and to potentially increase their influence on government. I think government needs to step up to the plate, which they won't. They're not going to. Only concern government has is to get reelected. And I made a mistake and didn't determine how much MPs and MPPs and the Prime Minister and the Premier of Ontario how much they make, but I'm sure it's more than 40,000 a year. It just seems it's a cash cow. So we need to get these elected officials to be responsible. And if they're not responsible, we need to get them out, remove them. These floor crossers, I don't know. I think that's just I think it's illegal. I think it's a travesty. I think if someone is elected to a platform to represent a group of people and a party and they jump across, they should be thrown out. There's no issues. If they're not happy, get out. And I don't think any sitting government who has a minority or majority, people crossing the floor to give them a majority position or a stronger majority position, I think those people should be thrown out. They're not representing Canada. They're not representing the people that they ran. They're just jerks. In any case, that's my opinion. Okay, so I think I've said enough. I've committed to do 52 of these podcasts. I know I don't make a very good presentation, but it's hard doing everything by yourself. I have 14 video clips, which I wanted to use. And let me show you a couple. Let me just get this out of here. See if I can do this. Just give me a second. So I have a number of video clips which I wanted to use in the podcast, and different soundtracks. I don't know what's going on there, but let me jump over. So I don't know what happened to my video soundtrack, but you can see I have different video backgrounds which I wanted to use, and it's hard addressing all of the different. What have I got going on here? All the different buttons to make it all work in a system. I don't have. Let's get rid of this. In any case, it's a little bit difficult. There's all sorts of options to use to make the podcast better. Come on, we got here? I don't know what happened to that one, but anyway, I don't know what happened to that one either. Oh, there it is. But there are ways to make the podcast better, but it's a little difficult to do all by yourself. But I'll try to do better. In any case, thanks, Jeff, for watching. And Danny, I'm sorry if I upset you for not micro analyzing every dollar and cent. And to anybody else who's out there, thanks a million. I have 40 more to go, and hopefully I'll do a little better in the future. So thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Remember, I don't promote any sort of civil distress or anything like that. All I want you to do is think. Think about what's going on. And I mean, is government really representing you? uh, I don't know. Is there a conspiracy in effect here? Again, another question. Um, is the middle class going to be here in 10 years? I don't know. I don't see a lot of jobs materializing. I know there's a lot of master's level students graduating with no jobs, no opportunities. And I don't know what that says, but it's not good. So, okay, that's it. Thanks, everybody, which means three or four. I'll see you in a week. Bye.